The settlement on Kale 7 had always been temporary. Myra knew that from the moment she'd stepped off the colony ship 3 years ago. The prefab structures, the ration supplies, the way everyone spoke in terms of when we move on rather than if, it all screamed impermanence. But she'd grown attached to this hostile world anyway, with its violet skies and the forest of crystalline trees that sang in the wind. Tonight, that forest was silent. Myra crouched by her tent's entrance, thermal scanner in hand, watching the tree line. The Vorkai had been circling the camp for 2 days now, massive, Volf-like predators with 6 legs and bioluminescent markings that pulsed with their heartbeats. Beautiful, deadly, and now, desperate. The colony's expansion had pushed into their hunting grounds. The Vorkai were starving, and starving predators made mistakes. She heard it before she saw it, a high-pitched whimper, barely audible over the hum of the perimeter generators. Myra's hand went to her sidearm, but she didn't draw. The sound came again, pitiful and weak, from just beyond the camp's edge. Against every protocol, every survival instinct screaming at her, Myra disabled her sector of the perimeter fence and stepped through. The cubs were huddled beneath a fallen crystal tree, their bioluminescent markings flickering weakly. There were 2 of them, no larger than earth dogs, their fur matted with something dark. Blood, she realized. Not theirs, their mother's, probably. The adult Vorkai corpse lay 30 meters away, caught in one of the automated defense turret's firing line. "Oh, you poor things," Myra whispered. The cubs' eyes, 4 each, arranged in pairs fixed on her with that peculiar intelligence she'd noticed in adult Vorkai. They didn't run. They didn't attack. They simply watched, trembling as this strange 2-legged creature approached. Myra had seen the reports. Vorkai cubs abandoned by their pack didn't survive. They needed the regurgitated food, the warmth, the protection. These 2 had hours at best. She made a decision that would have gotten her expelled from the colony if anyone found out. "Come on," she said softly, reaching out slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." It took 20 minutes of patient coaxing, but eventually both cubs allowed her to gather them into her arms. They were heavier than they looked, their bodies dense with muscle even in infancy. Myra carried them back through the fence, reactivated the perimeter, and brought them into her tent. Inside, she laid out her thermal blanket and set the cubs on it. They huddled together immediately, their markings synchronizing, a sign of sibling bonding, according to the xenobiology reports. Myra pulled out her emergency rations, the high-protein paste that tasted like regret but kept colonists alive. She squeezed some onto her fingers and offered it tentatively. The cubs sniffed, then licked it clean. Within minutes, they'd consumed 3 days' worth of her rations. "Worth it," Myra muttered, watching them settle down, their breathing evening out. She should have reported this, should have called it in. But she knew what would happen. The cubs would be humanely euthanized to prevent potential future attacks. The colony didn't have resources to spare on alien wildlife, especially predators. Myra dimmed her tent's lights and lay down beside them, one hand resting gently on the nearest cub's flank. Its bioluminescent markings pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm, peaceful. She fell asleep to that rhythm, unaware of the eyes watching from the forest beyond. Dawn came cold and blue-violet, the twin suns of Kale 7 barely breaching the horizon. Myra woke to silence, the kind that made the hair on her neck stand up. The cubs were gone. She bolted upright, her hand going to her empty holster. Her sidearm was still there, but the tent flap was open, moved aside with precision rather than torn. Myra stepped outside and froze. The cubs sat at attention 10 meters from her tent, positioned like sentries. Their markings blazed bright in the dawn light, pulsing in a complex pattern she'd never seen before. Between them and the camp's perimeter stood the largest Vorkai she'd ever seen, Wrath. She knew it was him from the stories the scouts told, the alpha with the scar across his right eyes, the one who'd led his pack through the colony's first winter, always watching but never attacking, until the expansion, until they'd taken too much. Wrath's 8 eyes fixed on Myra, and she felt the weight of his intelligence, his judgment. His markings pulsed once, twice, a deep crimson that spoke of threat. The automated turrets tracked him but didn't fire. He was just outside their engagement range, positioned with obvious intentionality. The cubs yipped, a sound that carried across the still morning air. Their markings shifted, matching Wrath's pattern before breaking into something else, something that looked almost like communication. Wrath's head tilted. His markings changed, cycling through colors Mira didn't have names for. Then the cubs moved. Not back to Myra, not forward to Wrath. They positioned themselves in a perfect defensive line, facing outward from the camp, their small bodies rigid with purpose, guarding. Myra's breath caught. They were guarding their camp, guarding her. Wrath watched for a long moment, then did something that made Myra's blood run cold. He lowered himself to the ground, front legs extended in the Vorkai gesture of respect, of acknowledgement. Then he rose and turned, his massive form disappearing into the crystal forest. But not before others emerged from the tree line. 5, 10, 15 Vorkai, all adults, all following their alpha. They circled the camp once, their markings blazing in perfect unison, a light show that woke half the colony. And then they were gone. The cubs remained at their posts until full dawn, until Myra approached and knelt between them. They turned to her then, their markings shifting to a warm gold, and nuzzled against her hands. The colony director found her there an hour later, surrounded by shocked xenobiologists and bewildered security personnel. There would be questions, investigations, possible sanctions. But as Myra sat with the cubs, watching the forest where Wrath had vanished, she understood something the reports had never captured. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its weapons or its technology. It was its capacity for compassion, even especially when it made no logical sense. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe recognized that strength and answered in kind. The Vorkai never attacked the settlement again, and the cubs named Hope and Dawn by a colony that voted to keep them grew into bridges between two species that learned, slowly, to share a world, all because one human chose kindness over fear, and an alpha recognized honor when he saw it. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.